Welcome into CBS Sports HQ, your college football happy hour. I'm Amanda Guerra with you. This brought to you by Zevo. People-friendly, bug-deadly. We are now on to week 2 in college football after week 1 gave us pretty much everything we wanted and a lot more. Taking a look at some notable games we've got coming up this week. We are going to give you picks for all the ranked games, some notable ones. Of course, you got Alabama there at Texas. A lot of people, a lot of eyes on that one. Alabama, a huge favorite. Kentucky at Florida. Florida jumping up to number 12 after they were unranked, beating Utah. Baylor taking on BYU. BYU jumping up 4 spots in this week's AP Top 25 poll. So, our rankings here.
When do we start tracking these, by the way?
We are tracking. What do you mean start tracking them?
Why? Why are we
tracking them? Because, you know, it puts pressure on you to make good picks. Because I take your picks seriously. Last week, Brady Quinn going 11-6-1. Danny Kanell, whose voice you've been hearing, 7-10-1. Brady now leads overall 17-8-1. Danny 9-16-1. Let's welcome in Brady and Danny here. Danny, you were upstairs. You said I have something to say, but I want to wait. Brady's doing
celebrating. He's raising the roof.
The raising the roof, which just goes to show our age.
Bring back 1997.
What were we going to say upstairs?
So, first of all, no one picks every single game the way we do, but that's what we do for our viewers. The other thing is, do you know how many times last week I said I would not touch this game, but if you made me take a side, I would take this one? Yes, but then there were some totals that I actually like better. I think we should be able to select like the 10 best matchups that we like as our favorites and say these are the ones that we want to track, that we feel confident in, that we're absolutely going to lock in. I think you need to be more selective. Like, you don't want to just spray the board.
That's not how this works, right, Brady?
I know. Well, yeah,
I mean, for a guy who just had his alma mater hold on by the slimmest of margins. I'm surprised he's crying so much right now about what's happening in college football. Look, Danny, I don't make the rules. I just try to play by them. And here's the reality. Last week you had said week 1 you hate because you don't have a good feel for what's going to happen.
It's crap
and the funny thing is, I actually echo your sentiment now as we head into week 2 having to make picks based on what we saw in week 1. I think it's one of the most hardest things to do is dissecting, for example, Wake Forest, who covered versus VMI, and what that means moving forward now, and especially considering some breaking news in college football with Sam Hartman being back. Those sorts of decisions are then hard to discern and how you want to, bet that game, especially with a moving line. So I would argue this. Look, you're not out of it. It's early.
Oh, yeah.
There's always a time for a great comeback. You don't win the games in the first, second, third quarters. You win it in the fourth quarter, Danny. So stay optimistic, buddy.
That's right. I will. And now we do away with the graphic, all right? Because we don't have to leave it up there the whole time, Jack. We get it. We get the records.
I think it was up there for about 8 seconds. You did say, though, eventually at some point it's all going to come together. So we'll start with you here. Okay. We have Baylor going to BYU. BYU favored at home by 3. The total in this one, 53 and a hook. You didn't like any of the big lines. Here's a nice little tiny one for you.
Yeah, I like this game itself. I mean, of all the games this weekend, I think this one has the most potential to be a thrilling fourth quarter matchup, and the spread would indicate that as a field goal difference in these two teams. I like BYU in this matchup, laying the field goal at home. They've got a great home field advantage. The Cougar fan base will be out in full force. Baylor better be ready for a matchup. I think they will. Blake Shapen, they took care of business week 1. Blake Shapen had a fantastic job. Now he's been the full-time starter. But Kalani Sitake has the most experienced team in the country returning. And I think that showed in a game against USF where they jumped out to a 28-0 halftime, first quarter lead, 38-7 at halftime. The final score was a little bit misleading as South Florida scored a couple touchdowns late. BYU is impressive as it gets, so give me the Cougars at home laying the 3.
Danny, I'm with you on this one. I think I said last week, I feel like BYU is a little underappreciated, just how good this team is, especially with Jaron Hall coming back. And they went to the transfer portal to get Christopher Brooks from Cal, the running back who displayed himself last week, over 130 yards on the ground and a touchdown, along with Puka Nacua to go along with some of that too on the ground, even as a wide receiver. So people are underestimating just how good this BYU team is. It's hard playing up there, Provo, Utah, at altitude. That's going to play a factor too. I think Jaron Hall is going to be able to take advantage of the Baylor secondary that, to be quite honest with you, is lacking some experience there. So even though everyone kind of seems to look at Baylor and they look at Dave Aranda and think, yeah, he's a defensive guru, The problem is they've still got some youth back there, and I think BYU will be able to take advantage of it. So, look, this was one of the hardest picks for me, I think in part because these two teams are pretty evenly matched. But I'm going to go with the home team here. It's a home team pick. I think BYU is able to win it by 3, if not by more.
BYU as a program has not been, or excuse me, Baylor as a program hasn't been to Provo since 1974. All right, we have Kentucky at Florida. Florida jumping into the rankings. They were unranked last week. They are now ranked 12th after their win against Utah. I don't know why Billy Napier was wearing a coat for during that game, though. But let's talk about this game. The Gators favored at home by 5. The total is 51 and a hook. Brady, we'll start with you.
You know, if this game was in Lexington, I might feel a little different about it. And I do have concerns about Florida after such a kind of emotional win, if you will, to open the season in the Swamp versus Utah, a team that they're home underdogs for. You know, how do you get revved back up? Well, it's SEC play. I don't think it'll be that difficult. And you've got one of the better teams in the SEC East, led by Will Levis, who's one of the more prolific quarterbacks in college football. So they better be ready for this one. But, like, this is a coming out party, you know, for me with Anthony Richardson. If he continues to play the way and put together some of the highlights like we saw versus Utah, he's going to be a Heisman candidate. And when we saw Travis Etienne's little brother, a stud out of the backfield too, make his impact. So, look, Florida's got playmakers all over the field. I think bottom line is when you compare these two rosters, Florida's just a better roster and more talented, even though I might say Will Levis is further along as a quarterback at this point. Look, we got to give credit to UK's defense. I think there'll be a big challenge for Florida's offense and Anthony Richardson as they shut down Brett Gabbert, who's one of the more prolific passers in the MAC last week. But without Chris Rodriguez, I think that takes away one of the better playmakers for UK. So I'm going to lay the 5 points. Don't feel great about it, but I think this is going to be a great game, one of the better ones in the weekend. Oh, by the way, I like the over in this one, Danny. I think there'll be a decent amount of scoring.
I'm with you on the Gators. Amanda, I don't know if you know this, the Cover 3 pod, occasionally they'll call me Gator Dan. I don't like the name Dan, but I don't like the Gators either, but they'll call me Gator Dan because sometimes it's good to jump on the Gators, and I think this is one of those times. I'm with Brady for a lot of the reasons he mentioned. I think Billy Napier inherited a really talented roster, and it's funny because Dan Mullen got run off for not recruiting well enough, but he still had top 10 classes. The Gator fans were just mad he didn't have top 2 or 3 classes the way Kirby Smart was. And I am 100% on board, Brady, with the Anthony Richardson bandwagon. This player was special. He looked completely in control, incredibly athletic, a mix of maybe Josh Allen and Cam Newton, run around making plays and fully capable of executing that system. And the suspensions for Kentucky, I think, are going to be too much in this game. I'm going to lean towards the under. I think you'll see a little bit more of a lower scoring game, but where I agree with Brady is laying the 5.
Okay, Gator Dan, thank you so much. Like, don't say that on air. You know we're just going to use this now all season.
The worst,
just
too.
don't say those things.
Well, anytime we pick the Gators, you can use it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Gator Dan. Let's move on. Alabama is still ranked number 1 going up against Texas. Brady, you're going to be in Austin for this game. By the way, it's going to be close to 100 degrees, so enjoy that Austin heat there. We finally got to see Quinn Ewers here. Alabama favored by 20 in this game, though. Brady, what's your play?
Yeah, this is like what the biggest home underdog Texas have been in like over 15 years or something like that. Look, breaking down Quinn Ewers in his first start, I'll be honest with you, he's very green, very talented, but very green. And I think Nick Saban, their defense, is going to have their way with Quinn Ewers with as much as he stared down targets, threw a pick in the last game versus Louisiana Monroe. Honestly, could have thrown more if not for a couple drops. So just got some big concerns, big reservations about Quinn Ewers and his ability to execute versus a Nick Saban-led team and really more defensively with the talent that they have. They've got to find a solution for Will Anderson. No one in college football has been able to do so. And outside of that, I mean, what's Saban's record versus former assistants? 25-1, something like that. And mind you, you've got Bryce Young, the defending Heisman Trophy winner, who looks like he's going to win another one. I mean, I thought coming in the season this might be C.J. Stroud's award to win. Then I was reminded after one game, oh yeah, it's still Bryce Young who's the best quarterback in the country by far. And they throw into a guy in Jermaine Burton who they took from Georgia that seems to just fill it right in. And after all these other wide receivers we've seen who he's been able to have a connection with or had that connection there in Alabama, Jermaine Burton looks to be the next one. So bottom line is I'm weighing the points with Bama. I know this is their first road test in the Nick Saban era as far as actually being not a neutral site but on the road. But 20 points might not be enough in this one. Alabama may run away with it.
So did you guys know this is the first time they've met in the regular season in 100 years? That was the last time they met in the regular season. Of course, they met in the national championship game not that long ago. That was the last time they faced at a neutral site. I think Austin is going to be insane. I think the atmosphere is going to be absolutely incredible. Is it going to be enough? Like, I think Nick Saban still dominates his assistants, but I think it's time. I think there's overreactions after week 1. And Blake Anderson, head coach at Utah State, said this is the best football team he's ever seen in the history of his 30-plus years of coaching. That to me says, okay, let's dial it back just a little bit. I wish this was over 21, and maybe if you wait till game time, it will get over that 3 touchdowns. It's a big number. I'm going to go ahead and take Texas. The last time they played in a big matchup like this at home, they gave LSU, who went on to win the national championship and one of the best offenses we've seen in the last decade with Joe Burrow, they gave them a run for their money. Alabama's going to win, but I'm going to bank on Quinn Ewers and more so Bijan Robinson getting the run game going, keep this thing tighter, hopefully keep away if you're Steve Sarkisian from that offense. I'm going to say they cover the 20 points. I like it better if it's over 21, which it probably will.
I agree. Austin's going to be insane. The reason we put up y'all's rankings is because you guys disagree like this on so much. And that's why we're going in total opposite directions here. Let's recap some of these first couple of games there. Look, they both agree that the Cougars are going to cover. They both like Florida to cover. Their opposite sides in both of those games on the total, and complete opposite sides when it comes to Alabama visiting Texas this weekend there in Austin. Coming up, Pitt managed to get the win in the backyard brawl, but they are a home underdog against Tennessee. We'll head to the SEC and ACC to get picks for those ranked games next. Welcome back into HQ, presented by Zevo here. Week 2 college football jumping into ranked SEC and ACC games we get this week. When it comes to the rankings, Arkansas, by the way, jumping up 3 spots after their win against Cincinnati. Tennessee jumping into the top 25, and they are the road favorite at Pitt after their blowout game against Ball State. And by the way, when it comes to Wake Forest, we do get to see Sam Hartman play. We did not think he was going to be able to play for the first month because of a blood clot issue, but he has now been cleared. Let's welcome back in Brady, Quinn, and Danny Kanell here to go through these games. All right, let's start App State at A&M. A&M had the shutout win against Sam Houston, but a lot of people still not impressed with what they saw from the Aggies there. App State, though, Chase Bryce launching some touchdowns in that game, though. Aggies favored by 17, the total 53 and a hook.
I actually like App State in this one. I thought they showed so much fight playing at home against North Carolina. It was one of the more wild finishes of the year. They missed two two-point conversions late in the game. Chase Bryce played a phenomenal game, 6 touchdowns he had in that one. And Sean Clark, his coach, got up in front of the media and just basically put his arm around him and said, hey, you will not see a tougher competitor. And they're going to need that tough competitor to play Texas A&M and cover this spread. But I think they do. The Aggies, I think, are a little bit of a quarterback quagmire. Haynes King was named the starter. He was sloppy. He was not great. 2 interceptions, underthrow on 1. It was a little bit off just for whatever reason. Aniyah Smith was the lone bright spot for that offense, kind of around 168 yards receiving and a couple of touchdowns. But I still think they're trying to figure out their way. They'll be able to score, but I also think App State will score enough points to keep this one within 2 touchdowns. I think they lose by 2 touchdowns, but I think they cover the 17-point spread. So give me App State, one of the tougher schedules in the country too. North Carolina week 1, now having to travel to SEC country and take on Texas A&M. But I'll go ahead and take Appalachian State.
You know, Danny, I had some reservations about being on the other side of this bet, in part because of who Texas A&M plays next week. Remember, you get that big matchup versus the Miami Hurricanes, so kind of felt like a trap game, right? Like, could you be overlooking potentially App State looking ahead to the Miami Hurricanes? Here's the hard part, though. Appalachian State has traditionally relied on their defense. Defensively, they've been one of the better in really college football overall. That wasn't the case, at least not versus North Carolina last week, where Drake May absolutely lit them up. And mind you, side comment, Drake May, somebody needs to put this young man up for the Heisman so far. He's been phenomenal this year. I don't know that anyone expected him to put up these type of numbers this early, regardless of who they're playing against. But back to this game. Look, I have the same reservations you do about the Texas A&M offense, although that's kind of been the reservations we've always had about the Texas A&M offense is Haynes King, the quarterback position. Can they do anything other than run the football? They really didn't even run the football that well last week versus Sam Houston State. And you kind of point out the Aniyah Smith in the passing game. Here's the reality. I think Vegas is begging you to do what Danny's doing and taking App State here. I think Texas A&M gets up for this game. I think they control App State. I think App State is going to have a hard time rebounding from what was an absolutely thriller of a game, but also in the end, a dramatic loss. So I'm going to lay the 17 points here with A&M, and I think they're going to be able to cover this, and I think they're going to continue to keep building on the Jimbo Fisher, these highly touted recruiting classes, and only continue to get better as the year goes on.
We get South Carolina at Arkansas. Arkansas again up to 16 now after their win against Cincinnati. Brady, we're all looking at this game to get a good judgment of each of these teams going into that game. What did you see from Arkansas? They're favored by 8 in this one in your play.
Yeah, look, KJ Jefferson continuing to carry this team, really. When you look at what he's capable of, Raheem Sanders, too, in the backfield, that was part of it. And we saw, obviously, that the transfer wide receiver from Oklahoma, Jaden Hazel, like we had talked about, and really tight end Trey Knox, they were making the big plays in the passing game to replace the big shoes left behind in Treylon Burks. This is a tough one to pick, though. This is actually my least favorite line of the entire week, in part because I hate that 8 number as it currently stands. And look, South Carolina got off to a slow start for Spencer Rattler's debut. But look, Georgia State's not a pushover either. They're usually one of the better teams in the Sun Belt. So this was tough for me. I'm laying the points with Arkansas. I just think Sam Pittman's done a great job of really building a culture and a program there that knows how to win. The tough part is you got to win by a couple of scores here. I don't think they're going to find their way into a touchdown and a 2-point conversion for any reason. So I'm laying the points with Arkansas. I don't feel great about it. And I'm also taking the under in this one. I think it'll be a lower scoring game.
I'm with you on that. I like the under too. And Sam Pittman, by the way, he's not going to endorse it, but he definitely enjoyed some cold beers after that game. Some great sound from him after that one, enjoying the victory. The reason I'm on South Carolina is exactly what we were talking about. That 8 is a big number. I just don't know if Arkansas is at a place. Even the Cincinnati game, tightly contested, back and forth matchup. I think this will be one of those more physical affairs. I like the job that Shane Beamer, similar to what Sam Pittman has done, building a culture around the team, belief in the program. Shane Beamer's done the same thing in there in Columbia for the Gamecocks. So I think they might have been sleeping on their first opponent, circling this matchup as their first SEC game. I think Spencer Rattler will get better. His playmaking ability outside the pocket, I think, will be the difference in this game. Lower scoring game, but I think it's a touchdown win for Arkansas.
We get Tennessee at Pitt here. Pitt staying at number 17. They managed to eke out their win. Tennessee, though, blowing out Ball State. So they jump into the top 25. They are now ranked 24th, and they are favored on the road at this one by 7. The total 65 and a hook. What's your play?
I love Hendon Hooker. I love Tennessee. I love the job that Josh Heupel is doing. But
there comes
Pitt playing at home with a full touchdown as a touchdown dog. Give me those points all day long. That was very much a feeling out process for Keaton Slovis. Settled into the game finally. It felt like late in that game it was a little bit of a struggle, but Pitt is pretty physical. I think this will be one of the more entertaining games of the weekend as well. 2 top 25 teams. I think the atmosphere will be electric. Pat Narduzzi called out ESPN and was like, hey, you guys are disrespecting our fans. They've got a ton of enthusiasm as defending ACC champ. And don't forget, they did beat this team last year in Knoxville, so they know what they're capable of doing. I don't know if they get the outright win, but I think this will be a field goal type game. Give me the Pitt Panthers. And don't forget, Amanda, you know where my dad went to school. He's a Pitt Panther. Hail to Pitt. Give me Pitt in the point.
Danny, I'm right there with you. We agree finally on one here. Look, Hendon Hooker looked fantastic. Really left off where he finished last season. The defense stymied Ball State. Getting 3 turnovers while the starters were still there and holding Ball State to only 74 yards rushing. So this is going to be a big-time challenge for Pitt, but this is like Pat Narduzzi ball. That's exactly what he does. And I do think Keaton Slovis will continue to get better as he gets his feet more comfortable underneath him there in Pittsburgh. But, you saw those transfers help fill in the void at the wide receiver position for Jordan Addison, who left to go to USC, and Kanell Mumfield and then Bubba Means, both kind of pitching in to go along with that ground attack led by Rodney Hammond Jr. So, look, this is a physical team. This is a team that's going to rely on those 8 starters who came back on defense that you saw versus West Virginia, and basically trying to drag this game out to the fourth quarter where they make it a brawl. And then you see Pitt drive down the field for that score to go up and not only just outright cover, but actually win this game. So I'll go ahead and take Pitt, and I'll take the 7 points, but I don't think they're going to need the points. I think they're going to win outright.
Yeah, I did see the thing, which our producer sent me, and I did see it earlier about the Tennessee fans are only offered seats in the 500 level. Have you seen that? And so they're not buying any of these tickets. So as you mentioned, a ruckus crowd at the stadium formerly known as Heinz Field, because I can't remember what we call it at this point.
Acrisure.
Yeah.
Acrisure.
Yeah.
I think the whole season I'm just going to call it the stadium formerly known as Heinz Field.
I like that.
Let's talk about Wake Forest at Vanderbilt here. We did mention we get Sam Hartman back. The line was Wake Forest by 8. It is now 13. Vanderbilt, shout out to them. They've won 2 games. That's as many games as they won all of last year. Brady, what's your play on this one?
I kind of wavered back and forth, and hearing the news of Sam Hartman coming back, this line jumping to 13. I was on Wake initially because I like what I saw from Mitch Griffiths in Hartman's place, but 13 points, I don't know. It's too much. I mean, look what Clark Lee and Vanderbilt has done so far. I know they're 2-0, and you can make the case they haven't really played anyone. Bottom line is, though, who's going to stop Mike Wright at quarterback, both through the air and on the ground? He's been phenomenal so far this year. I think the defense has improved. I think Clark Lee has upgraded this roster. I think they can hang around with Wake. I mean, let's not forget, too, it's not like this defense at Wake has been able to stop anyone either. So even though Hartman's back and they're going to have a high-powered offense, that's kind of what they've been known for under Dave Clawson. The reality is I think this game will be a lot closer than 2 scores here. So I'm taking Vanderbilt in the 13 points at this point. I think they can keep this close. I like the under, too. I think if you think Vanderbilt's going to keep it close, obviously Clark Lee's running the football, trying to slow the game down and shorten the game, not allowing Wake to just sit back and do their slow RPO game and take shots downfield.
I believe we have a lock between us two right here, which has been a minute since we've had. I want to know our record on these too. But for all the same reasons that you gave, I totally agree. I think there was a massive overreaction to Sam Hartman coming back. He doesn't play defense, and that's the thing that worries me about Wake Forest. Why I think they'll win this game. 66-2, I think, is an overreaction as well. The number is just way too high, so I'm on the under as well. When was the last time Vanderbilt was 2-0? And had this type of enthusiasm and put up a 63 spot in week 1 against Hawaii? Felt like they find a quarterback, as Brady mentioned. I think the crowd actually might be in a factor, which is something I never thought I would have said about a Vanderbilt crowd in Nashville. But there is a tremendous amount of excitement. And Clark Lee said he wants to be one of the best teams in the SEC. Well, he's a long ways from that. He is making strides as making this team a tough out within the SEC, and for sure with Wake Forest coming to town. So give me those points and the and Vanderbilt Commodores. My guy Barton Simmons,
I was about to say, shout out
That's
to
my
Barton.
boy. I can't go against him.
Let's talk about Southern Miss at Miami. The beginning of the Mario Cristobal era went off very well. Danny, last week you didn't love the big spreads there. This is Miami by 26. The total's 57.
So it's hard. There will be no Hurricane Kanell. I'll say that. We're not going with that name. I like Southern Miss in this one. Miami looked spectacular. They took care of business against Bethune. They put up a 70 spot in that game. Southern Miss has massive quarterback issues. They have Frank Gore Jr. playing quarterback and like a wildcat version of quarterback. When he's not, the other 2 quarterbacks combined for 89 yards and 2 interceptions. It was atrocious. But you know what I think you're going to get? I think you're going to see Southern Miss say, all right, Miami Hurricanes, you guys are supposed to be more physical. We're going to get a steady dose of Frank Gore Jr. in this game, who I think propels them to a tighter finish than people think. So give me Southern Miss and the 26.
Oof, I have a hard time believe that. A 4 overtime loss, heartbreaker. At home for Southern Miss. It's hard to get back up and really recover from those sort of things. But on the other side, I talked about this with Texas A&M. Miami's got to play A&M a week from now, and maybe they're caught looking ahead. Maybe that's how Southern Miss hangs around this game. But I think that'd be more the case if they had a passing attack. But you just mentioned it. They really don't. They're struggling so bad at the quarterback spot. I had to lay the 26 points with the Hurricanes here. And look, you can say whatever you want about Bethune-Cookman and Miami doing exactly what everyone's thought they were supposed to do. But that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to beat those teams that are layups for you the way in which Miami did. So bottom line is Miami's the far more talented team. I don't think Mario Cristobal is going to let them take their foot off the gas. I think this is going to be a big-time win for them. I think they're going to cover the spread because of some of the issues that Southern Miss is dealing with. So lay the 26 points. And as we saw in week 1, they're not going to be afraid to put up, over 57 if they have to do it, themselves. So I'm also taking the over in this one.
There you go, Hurricane Brady. We got him. Got Gator Dan, Hurricane Brady there. Let's recap their picks because finally we do have some agreement when it comes to App State at Texas A&M. They are on opposite sides when it comes to that. However, 2 lock unities there. Tennessee at Pitt, Wake Forest at Vanderbilt. Take Pitt and the under, Vandy and the under in that game. CBS Sports HQ presented by Zevo. Big Ten ranked games we've got coming up during week 2 of college football here. Some big spreads. Ohio State favored by 43.5 over Arkansas State. Michigan, though, a whopping 51 over Hawaii. We'll see if maybe Brady or Danny would like to put a little money on that game if they're willing to take the over there. But let's start with Arkansas State at Ohio State. Ohio State now down to third after Georgia jumped them in the rankings. They're 43.5, the total 68.5 there. Jackson Smith and Jigba, we're not necessarily sure we're going to see him play. CJ Stroud didn't have his best game. What do you think about this?
So I think this is one of those overreactions to Ohio State. A lot of people saying, oh, what happened to this offense? I mean, maybe they played a really good team in Notre Dame who's better than we thought they were, and Notre Dame will get better as the season goes along and they figure out their offense. But the good news was you saw Ohio State's defense step up, and they're going to need that Ohio State defense to continue to step up because Arkansas State rushed for 339 yards this past weekend in their opener, which was a massive blowout for them. For me, there's a sentiment of, oh, Ohio State's going to figure it out, and they're going to throw it all over the yard, and all of a sudden the offense is just going to be up there putting up massive points. I'm going to wait until I see it. Clearly, they still have all the talent. Clearly, they still have all the weapons. But I think Arkansas State hangs around a little bit in this one. I would not recommend putting anything on this game, but I'm going to go ahead and take the dogs here. Say there's a little bit of overreactions to week one and what you think Ohio State's going to be. I want to see what they are before I start betting them with this big of a number by their name. So give me Arkansas State and the 43.5.
Oh, I'm on the other side of this one. I think this is one of those games where you go out and you prove it if you're Ohio State. I mean, for starters, yeah, they played a really good Notre Dame team that basically had a first half go exactly how they needed it to go. And then, Ohio State started to utilize that same exact game plan and beat Notre Dame with it. Whether Jackson Smith and Jigba ends up playing or not doesn't matter. They got Morrison Harrison Jr., they got Emeka Egbuka. They've showcased a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. Even guys that they hadn't contributed before still end up stepping up. So I think this is a better opportunity for CJ Stroud to really respond and recover from what was not his best performance. He got sacked and hit early in that game. And there's something that kind of told me that maybe he got a little bit of happy feet, maybe felt a little bit uneasy, even though Notre Dame really didn't get pressure the rest of the game. It just seemed like he was bothered by something. Maybe not having your best wide receiver was one of it. But I think this is one of those more recommendation games where you're going to see him absolutely go off. Look, I know Arkansas State just drummed Grambling. There's a difference between Hugh Jackson, his first year at Grambling, and Ryan Day that's now built this entire thing up. So this is one where I think Ohio State pulls away in the second half. It is a big number, but we saw the improved defense for Ohio State, which is their biggest Achilles heel. So for Ohio State, I think they're going to have, Arkansas State's going to have a hard time scoring points here. But this is one where CJ Stroud starts to put up those Heisman-like numbers as he climbs back into that conversation.
A big number for Ohio State, a bigger one for Michigan hosting Hawaii. Michigan favored by 51, Brady, in this game. The total is 65. What's your play here?
I'm laying the points here. I know I sound really chalky this week, but that's what we've gotten week 2. You've got a lot of big favorites. And Michigan was one of those teams I was most curious about to see how they would look coming out of the gates. You're playing a Colorado State team that had a lot of different, transfer players. You didn't know if that would help or not. And I was wrong. I thought Michigan might be a little bit slow out of the gates. They absolutely drummed Colorado State. And I think that's what they're going to do with Hawaii. Look, Hawaii's in a really tough spot right now. Timmy Chang, their head coach, is trying to rebuild a program that lost a lot of players before this season. And meanwhile, Michigan just reloaded. I mean, you lost Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo, Daxton Hill, all these talented players, and yet they bring in a few transfers, and with their recruiting and development, the defense looks as good as it ever has been. And I don't care if it's J.J. McCarthy who starts or Cade McNamara. Both of them come in and were productive. They've got more speed than ever at the wide receiver position between Roman Wilson, obviously back is Ronnie Bell, and then Cornelius Johnson. All those guys are very capable of impacting the offense with a big play. So to me, you lay the 51 points. Again, a big number. It scares a lot of people away. Not me. And obviously, if you think Michigan's going to win by that much, that means you think this number's going to hit the over.
Amanda, Hawaii's been outscored 112-27 in their 0-2 start. They gave up 63 points to Vanderbilt. But you know why you take them? Did you see that stat that was up on that graphic right there? Since 2000, there have been 9 games where you've had a 50-point favorite, and the favorites are 2-6 against the spread. The number is just too big. I do think clearly this is going to be close. You might be sweating it out. One small factor in, I'm curious, I don't wonder what Brady thinks about this. I think J.J. McCarthy is the guy. He's getting in to start this game. I think he puts on a phenomenal show. And I think Cade McNamara will come in as he typically does. They're a little bit more run-based, run-oriented, not quite as much firepower in that offense. And they let off the gas in the second half coming up just short of that number. So I'll give me Hawaii covering the 51.
Brady, you got thoughts on the quarterback situation
You think
there?
J.J. McCarthy
to see
starts?
JJ as opposed to Cade?
I do. I think J.J. McCarthy is the more explosive quarterback between the two. And, really, if you look at the stats, that offense, the Michigan offense, averages about a yard more in production when J.J. McCarthy is in there than when Cade McNamara is. And that's really just the fact that J.J. McCarthy can impact those plays with his legs. Cade McNamara's done a fine job. He's more of your prototypical pocket passer, where J.J. McCarthy can do both. So I think if they're looking for ways to get J.J. McCarthy on the field as the younger of the two quarterbacks, it's probably telling you something. He's probably the guy you should go with in general. That's just my thoughts on it. But again, Cade McNamara is the starting quarterback who helped them win a Big Ten championship and go to the college football playoff last year. So he's built up a lot of equity, I think, within that locker room and with that staff. And so I can understand why Jim Harbaugh is doing what he's doing right now. But I think eventually, if they want to climb as high as Michigan wants to climb and win a national championship, you got to put your most explosive and best quarterback out there. That's J.J. McCarthy.
A lot of big numbers in this group of games here. Another one, Akron at Michigan State. Michigan State favored by 35.5. You saw Peyton Thorne, throw 4 touchdown passes in that last game. We've had a pattern here. Brady, you're going with the big numbers. Danny is staying away from what about this game?
Same thing, going with the big numbers here. I really liked what I saw to Michigan State that really kind of carried over, what we saw last year, having a rushing attack with Jalen Berger, the transfer from Wisconsin, reminded you why he was a highly touted 4-star recruit. Even though it didn't work out at Wisconsin, it seems like it's going to work out in East Lansing. Peyton Thorne was efficient through the air. And really the defense, I think, was improved too. And you're taking on an Akron team that just beat St. Francis, which is located in Pennsylvania, by the way, for all you who didn't know out there. And I mean, they ended up winning that one in overtime. So it's a good win for Joe Moorhead, their new head coach, who's been a great offensive mind in college football. But there's a big-time talent gap between these two. I think Michigan State's going to be a contender in the Big Ten. So I think this is one of those where they get a big win. The defense flexes its muscles on what was an awful pass defense last year, and they showcase that they've made the improvements and they're a much more complete team.
See, Akron, they were overlooking their first opponent for this matchup against a Big Ten team. Why are you trying to take away from my guy Joe Moorhead's first big win in overtime? I think the number's too big. I think week 2 is the time to play the overreactions on these massive numbers. Give me Akron and all those points every single time.
It's just going to be really interesting to see where we
are
next week. Okay, Washington State at Wisconsin here. Let's talk about this one. Wisconsin favored by 17 at home. They are ranked 19th here at the total, 46 and a hook. We'll start with you.
Cam Ward, man, I'm telling you what, this quarterback is pretty special. 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's a transfer from the FCS level. He was the best player in the country at that level. He is doing some things for Washington State. I don't know if he gets the outright upset, but I think he keeps them around long enough to keep this game within the number. So go ahead and give me the Cougars against Wisconsin here on the road.
I'm with you. I'm going to take the 17 points. I don't feel great about it. I think it's in part because this Wisconsin offense picked up where they left off when they found Braylon Allen in the backfield, who's one of the best backs in the country, and relied heavily on that. Mertz, he was efficient. He wasn't asked to do too much. Only had 16 pass attempts and a nice touchdown over 200 yards passing. But, to me, that's not necessarily a game plan that's going to be able to win versus some of the best in the Big Ten this year, which clearly we're not talking about that yet. But to your point, I think Cam Ward's a playmaker. I think he keeps it close in this one. A little concerned anytime you got to play Wisconsin's defense in Wisconsin, as loud as that environment gets. And Jim Leonard's one of the best defensive coordinators. I mean, heck, he held Zach Ennestead, picking him off twice last week. So it's going to be an uphill battle. I don't feel good about it, but I honestly feel like at this point, I took so many favorites. I had to take at least one dog, and it happened to pick Washington State. So there you go.
You don't feel good about it, like on the one where you guys agree.
I know, right?
These Big Ten games. Let's recap their picks here so you can see maybe which side you're leaning on, because there's absolutely no agreement until it comes to that last game. Both like Washington State to cover against Wisconsin. Wisconsin being at home in that one. Coming up next, getting you ready for Week 12 here, taking a look at some other Big 12, Pac-12 ranked games we've got coming up. So we finally got to see what Oklahoma looks like without Lincoln Riley, with Brent Venables there. My assessment, fine. I'm going to go with fine, Danny. They look just fine, but as did USC, with Lincoln Riley now and Caleb Williams in their first game. But they've got a good one coming up against Stanford this week. All right, so let's talk about 23-ranked Houston at Texas Tech here. Houston coming off that triple overtime win against UTSA. Donovan Smith in for Tyler Shuck for the Red Raiders because he got hurt during the first game. I can talk. Red Raiders favored by 3, total 65.5.
I like Houston in this one. This is a game they would love to get revenge. Last year, it was their only blemish in the regular season. They lost week 1. Then they rattled off 11 regular season wins before losing to Cincinnati in the American Championship game. Clayton Tune, I think Dana Holgorsen has his quarterback. Donovan Smith, I think, will be fine. Zach Kittley is still there as the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech. I don't think that offense will slow down much, but I don't think that gap between Group of 5 and Power 5 teams, especially with Houston eventually going to the Big 12, I think this is kind of a Big 12 type of matchup where you'll see these teams go toe-to-toe, and I actually like Houston here getting the points.
I do too, especially when you're not expecting Taylor Shuck to start, right? He's going to be out for a period of time. Donovan Smith played well in his place last week, but you're going up against a backup quarterback, and that's where I think the advantage goes to Clayton Tune in Houston, which is, I guess you could call him a battle-tested team after that win last week. So I'll go ahead and take the 3 points here. I do think it's going to be a fair amount of high scoring, and Danny, you mentioned it. I mean, this is basically a matchup that we're going to see in the future once Houston's there. So bottom line is, you never know what's going to happen when a backup goes in, but the reality is Houston's got now an entire week to prepare for Donovan Smith to put the game plan together. And if he was the better of the 2 quarterbacks, he would have started in the first place. That's not the case here. So take the 3 points, and Houston, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't outright win it.
Brady, you think high scoring in that game? The total in this next one set at 70. Kent State at Oklahoma. We're waiting to see, as I mentioned, what Oklahoma looks like without Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams there, Dylan Gabriel, Brent Venables. They took care of business. They're favored by 32 in this. And as mentioned, the total is 70. What do you think about the Sooners going up against Kent State?
Yeah, laying the points here. And obviously, if I think they're going to, cover by 32 points, there's obviously, I think it's going to hit the over. And I know it seems really high, but this is kind of the adjustment that I think books are making now, looking at some of these spread offenses, especially one like Oklahoma with Jeff Lebby, who, right from the beginning of the game, they're airing it out with Dylan Gabriel. It makes a lot of sense. And it seems like Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Lebby picked up exactly where they left off at UCF. Eric Gray was solid out of the backfield to the ground as well. And really, the defense looked like it hadn't really skipped much of a beat. So I like the chances here of Oklahoma dominating versus Kent State. It seems like now we're starting to get to a point where we realize that maybe Oklahoma should have been looked at more as the favorite to win the Big 12 this year, that they're not going to skip a beat with Lincoln Riley not being their head coach.
I want to make sure we have something out there. I like Oklahoma too. I think they could be a team that actually could make the playoff as the winner of the Big 12. I think they're tougher than they were under Lincoln Riley on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think you saw any drop-off, and that was evidenced in week 1.
Where's the butt, Danny?
But give me Kent State in those points. If you haven't noticed any theme that's out there, these spreads are too daggum big. Give me Kent State and the points right there in this one. I think you'll see a little bit of a setback after week 1. Hey, let's get fired up. And then week 2, you come back to earth just a little bit. They're going to win. They're going to win by 4 touchdowns.
I was cheering
They're just not going to win by 32.
And how happy you were this past weekend during that Florida State game, Danny Kanell. Here we go. Picking against my Sooners. That's fine. We're just going to see how it goes there. Arizona State at Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders named the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. The Pokes are favored by 11 at home. The total is 54 and a hook. Brady, you get to go first here.
Spencer Sanders Offensive Player of the Year or just the week?
Week. Did I say year? Sorry. I mean, we could jump ahead. That's fine. Whatever.
I guess you could say Offensive Player of the Year so far, since we've only played one game. At least most teams have. No, but you're right. He was phenomenal. I mean, he looked like a Heisman contender at this point. And honestly, I think I have no reservations now about their offense, even though I was curious to see, this is a team that has traditionally started slowly to begin seasons, but that was not the case. Spencer Sanders played some of the best football he's ever played during his time there in Stillwater. It was the defense that was also a concern, and they didn't look so good. I mean, you gave up 44 to Central Michigan to allow them to creep back in the game. Yes, that was one of my covers last week that I won, but that's a problem moving forward for Derek Mason to figure out. And now you're taking on a team in Emory Jones who's got a mobile quarterback who did his part versus Northern Arizona last week in picking up the win, even though his passing game is still a work in progress. Look, this is actually a big line, in my opinion, for these two teams, because I actually think they're much more equal when you look at it. But playing in Stillwater, it's a tough play. It's a loud environment. The fans are right there on top of you. So I think Oklahoma State wins this one and covers. I think Derek Mason is able to get that defense to put together a game plan to get a couple of turnovers from Emory Jones and that's how they end up covering this one. So I like Oklahoma State in the under.
I'm with you on the Cowboys. Spencer Sanders was incredible. Because when you watch Spencer Sanders, if you watch him throughout his career, you kind of have two versions. And it unfolded last year in the Big 12 championship. You get one, and then their bowl game against Notre Dame, you get another. Well, you got the best version of Spencer Sanders, and that's obviously what Mike Gundy would love to see week in and week out. And if they are, they could be ruining Oklahoma's chances for that Big 12 title. They are that good. The defense was concerning. They actually took Spencer Sanders out of the game and put in all the backups and then had to put him back in to make sure they closed out Central Michigan. But I actually think that's one of those kind of good coaching scenarios. Mike Gundy and the staff, Derek Mason, the defensive coordinator, they can get after their defense and say, look, these are all the problems that we had. We'll correct those. I don't know if I'm ready to take Emory Jones on the road yet, even with that point spread. So I think Oklahoma State kind of exercises their demons against the Sun Devils. See how I did that? Just
Good
right
job.
on the fly.
Oh, congratulations.
Wasn't even planned.
If Danny does not win, the games this week, at least he won that one. USC going up a little bit north there to Northern California to take on Stanford here. 100th meeting between these two teams. Look, we were all waiting to see what this USC team looked like. They're favored by 9 on the road here. The total 65 and a hook.
So I think this one, Brady said Vegas, what they're daring you to do. I think they're daring you to say, oh, USC is back. They played. They looked awesome. Caleb Williams' show has started. Lincoln Riley's offense is awesome. And you're like, how can this only be 9? They are so much better than Stanford. I'm going to go ahead and take the Cardinal here, playing at home. I've covered games there. It is sleepy. There's going to be a massive letdown from that week 1 for USC. Tanner McKee is a pretty good quarterback, and David Shaw traditionally plays USC pretty tough. So go ahead and give me the Cardinal playing at home. And this is a trap game if there ever was one for Lincoln Riley. He better make sure they show up and are ready to go, because this one could be one where you're looking up in the second half being like, how is Stanford still in this game? Then all of a sudden you worry about that panic meter starting to rise. Ultimately, I think USC wins, but I like Stanford in the points.
Danny, I'm right there with you. I think when you go back and watch the tape of USC versus Rice, you look at the score and go, wow, they really blew Rice out of the water. And not that Rice is a great football school, but the reality is, are they really going to get 3 interceptions returned for touchdowns? I'm betting not versus Stanford, a team that typically likes to control the game, shorten the game. E.J. Smith provides the balance on the ground. You talked about Tanner McKee, who's a good decision maker and honestly one of the better secrets at the quarterback spot in college football. Kind of has a Davis Mills type feel where he's going to get drafted somewhere in the middle rounds and end up being a great NFL quarterback because he can make all the throws. He's incredibly impressive when you turn on tape and watch him. And as good as USC's offense was at times, I was going to say outside of the 3 interceptions returned for touchdowns, there's times you said kind of a hard time pulling away initially in that game versus Rice, where Rice had no business, even being around or being in close, marching order to what USC is capable of. So I like taking the 9 points there in Stanford. You talked about the environment. That's part of it. I also think this game hits the under at 65.5. They're begging you to think it's going to be a shootout. It's not going to be that. And Stanford doesn't want it to be that because they probably can't replicate that or match what USC can do. So this game hits the under, and this game is one where Stanford's going to cover that 9.
And you like the under in this one as well, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
We got some lock unity here.
Finally, after a minute, let's recap their picks for these Pac-12, Big 12 games there. So they both like Houston to cover, opposite sides when it comes to Oklahoma hosting Kent State there, and they both like Oklahoma State to cover. Lock unity when it comes to USC visiting Stanford. Coming up next, let's talk about Notre Dame. We'll get Brady's assessment of the Fighting Irish week 1 against Ohio State and get a pick for Marshall at Notre Dame next. CBS Sports HQ presented by Zevo here. Amanda Guerra, Brady Quinn, Danny Kanell here. So let's talk about Marshall at Notre Dame. Brady, we'll start with you. It looked pretty good for a while there against Ohio State. Ended up losing the game, but that's not too bad. Favored by 20 in this game. The total is 51.5.
Yeah, look, no moral victories just for being close or leading at halftime. That's not how it works. I think Notre Dame displayed a lot of things you got to like, though. Tyler Buchner, in a really tough environment, showed up and played particularly well in the first half and really throughout the course of the game. I thought he was a good decision maker. He ran well and showcased some of his athleticism. And look, the defense stepped up for a period of time, especially in a secondary that didn't get help much as far as the pressure goes, and went up against one of the most talented wide receiver groups in the country, limited them for a large majority of the game. So you got to give credit where credit's due in that regard. I think the one concern is the offensive line. They didn't have Jared Patterson, their starting left guard. That played a lot bigger impact than I think anyone realized, not only in the running game, but even in pass protection. And I think people were expecting more, given Harry Hiestan's back coaching their offensive lineup. So those are some of the questions coming into this next week, and really just how they respond, how they recover to what was a physical matchup versus a really, really good Ohio State team taking on a team that everyone thinks they should win. So do they let their guard down? Do they bring the same sort of juice and energy? Those are all the questions. My intel is that they will. I mean, they're still hungry for something. You heard Marcus Freeman talk about that this is their floor. Marshall comes in as a team that's got an experienced passer in Henry Columbia. His time dates back to playing quarterback at Texas Tech. So, he will threaten a little bit. But I think this is where you see Isaiah Foskey and the rest of the Notre Dame pass rush hit home better than they did versus Ohio State, which really stymied the passing attack and forced them to go to a lot of pressure looks that they probably didn't want to go to. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the 20 points here at Notre Dame. I think they just got more talent. They're better suited to take on this Marshall team right now and really respond to what was a disappointing loss. I know everyone else on the outside thought, hey, they kept this thing close. They had aspirations of going in there and winning. And I think that's what they're planning on doing now, is trying to move forward and dominate and get better.
So you make a lot of great points. You were right on Notre Dame last week, taking the points against Ohio State. I was wrong. And just out of spite, I'm going to go ahead and take the Thundering Herd again. I do think, though, this is one of those, this tests your mettle almost more than the Ohio State game. Like, how do you get back up for this game? I think it could be a sluggish. Like, I would love a first half underplay. I think Notre Dame will try to run the football a little bit more, try to establish the line of scrimmage. I think Marshall will get their best shot, but I don't think they'll be able to do much against Notre Dame's defense. Love a first half underplay in this one, but I'm very curious to see how they respond until I see him do it. Watch out for Henry Columbia. You mentioned him, had a pretty good game. He's a journeyman quarterback, which is crazy, but we see those in today's college game. I mean, transfers are all over the place. He's one of them. Had a pretty nice debut with Marshall. I'll say they hang around long enough to cover that spread.
It is time for your worry-free pick, presented by Zevo, people-friendly, Bug Deadly. Danny, I want to start with you.
Yeah.
Because I hope Chris Hassel has made it home in time to watch this. What is your worry-free pick?
This will be the most worry-free pick of the entire season. I don't know if you saw the Iowa Hawkeyes, but they put up a 7 spot in their win over San Diego, or it's not, I wish it was San Diego State. That'd make it feel better. It was South Dakota State that they were playing against. They won 7-3, but it was not a touchdown. It was a field goal and 2 safeties. That's right. 3 + 2 + 2 is 7. I don't know how you hit that trifecta in college football today. Now they play the Cy-Hawk Bowl. Iowa State has been a disaster. The last couple years are starting to trail off. Wonder where Matt Campbell has this program. But you know what they always do? They play pretty good defense. You know what Iowa does? Always play pretty good defense. The total is low at 41. I would take it at 35. I would still go under. These teams are going to bang on each other for 4 quarters. There's not going to be a lot of offense. Don't even sweat it. Take the under in the Cy-Hawk game.
Well, that's no fun. Everyone likes scoring. Come on, Danny. You got to be a little more optimistic that maybe Brian Ferentz and I were just holding it all back for this big matchup. One can only hope. I'm going to go with the team that I think is going to score a lot of points. In fact, more than 51. That's Michigan. Yes. Remember that big spread we talked about? And Danny threw out that stat of the 8 or 9 games, whatever the hell it was, of 50-plus spreads over how many years? Only 2 have won it. Well, that resembled more of Danny's first week record, that 2-6 or whatever it was. Michigan is going to cover in a big fashion, in part because Hawaii is not a good football team. The program's in a really, really tough spot. And then figure out they're going to have to travel all the way from Hawaii over to the East Coast and have to play in the big house. That's not an easy task. And let's not forget, too, Michigan's now starting to work their way up the rankings and putting themselves in a position where, let's just hypothetically say they lose to Ohio State at the end of the season. That's their only loss. If it's a tight game, maybe all of a sudden, it matters where they end up. So style points matter now in today's college football playoff era. And I think Michigan knows that. I think they know they're going to have to lay a big number against Hawaii, very similar to what Vanderbilt did when they went out to Hawaii and won by a big number. So this is one where I think Michigan puts their best foot forward. They're starting their best quarterback of the 2, in my opinion. So I fully suspect J.J. McCarthy and Wolverines are going to put up a big number versus Hawaii. And
I will say both of these bets hit last week. Your best bets, your worry-free picks. And so did producer Jax. Lock Unity, only 3, same number as last week. Congratulations on those. We do get confetti. It will be interesting to see how it all plays out next week. Enjoy the football games for week 2. Brady, Quinn, Danny, Kanell. I'm Amanda Guerra. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.